Have you ever wondered what Jesus endured in the final hours before his crucifixion? What happened on that dark and painful journey that changed the course of human history forever? Stay with this story, because what you are about to hear is a powerful account of sacrifice, love, betrayal, suffering, and redemption. The night was calm over Jerusalem, but unseen forces were already moving. The city was crowded with pilgrims who had come to celebrate the Passover, a feast that reminded the people of God's deliverance of Israel from slavery in Egypt. Yet this Passover would be unlike any other. Before the sun would rise again, events would unfold that would lead Jesus of Nazareth to the cross. Jesus had spent the evening with his 12 disciples in an upper room. There, he shared a final meal with them. The atmosphere was solemn, though many of the disciples did not fully understand what was about to happen. Jesus spoke words that puzzled them. He told them that one among them would betray him. Shock spread through the room. One after another, the disciples asked, "Lord, is it I?" Among them sat Judas Iscariot. For years, Judas had followed Jesus, witnessed miracles, and listened to his teachings. Yet greed had slowly hardened his heart. Unknown to the others, he had already agreed to hand Jesus over to the religious leaders in exchange for 30 pieces of silver. As the meal continued, Jesus took bread, blessed it, broke it, and gave it to his disciples. Then he took a cup and shared it with them. He spoke of his body that would be broken and his blood that would be shed. Though the disciples did not yet understand, Jesus was preparing them for what lay ahead. After the meal, they left the city and crossed the Kidron Valley toward the Garden of Gethsemane. The moonlight illuminated the olive trees as Jesus entered the quiet garden. The weight of what awaited him pressed heavily upon his soul. Taking Peter, James, and John farther into the garden, he told them that his soul was overwhelmed with sorrow, even unto death. Jesus moved a short distance away and fell to the ground in prayer. He knew the suffering that awaited him. He knew he would soon bear the sins of humanity. The burden was so immense that he prayed earnestly, asking if there was any other way. Yet despite the agony, his prayer ended with complete surrender to God's will. The disciples, exhausted from the day, struggled to stay awake. 3 times Jesus returned to find them sleeping. 3 times he urged them to watch and pray. While Jesus wrestled in prayer, they could not comprehend the significance of the moment. Then, in the darkness, the sound of approaching footsteps broke the silence. Torches flickered among the trees. Judas arrived, leading a crowd armed with swords and clubs. The betrayal had begun. Judas approached Jesus and greeted him with a kiss, the agreed signal to identify him. What should have been a sign of friendship became a symbol of betrayal. Jesus looked at Judas with sadness and asked if he was betraying the Son of Man with a kiss. The soldiers moved forward to arrest him. One of the disciples drew a sword and struck a servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. But Jesus immediately intervened. He healed the wounded man and told his followers not to resist. This was not the way of God's kingdom. As the soldiers seized Jesus, fear swept through the disciples. One by one, they fled into the night. The man they had followed for years now stood alone. Jesus was taken first to Annas, a former high priest, and then to Caiaphas, the current high priest. Throughout the night, religious leaders gathered to accuse him. False witnesses came forward, but their testimonies contradicted one another. Despite the accusations, Jesus remained silent. Finally, the high priest demanded that he answer whether he was the Messiah, the Son of God. Jesus confirmed the truth. To his accusers, this was enough. They declared him guilty of blasphemy. The atmosphere turned violent. Men surrounded Jesus, mocking him. They spat on him. They struck him with their fists. Some blindfolded him and demanded that he identify who had hit him. The one who had healed the sick and raised the dead endured humiliation at the hands of those he came to save. Meanwhile, Peter followed from a distance. Earlier that evening, he had confidently promised never to abandon Jesus. Yet fear now gripped his heart. As Peter warmed himself by a fire in the courtyard, a servant girl recognized him. She accused him of being one of Jesus' followers. Peter denied it. A second accusation came, then a third. Each time, Peter insisted he did not know Jesus. At that very moment, a rooster crowed. Peter remembered Jesus' prediction that before the rooster crowed, he would deny him 3 times. Overwhelmed with sorrow and shame, Peter went away and wept bitterly. As dawn approached, the religious leaders brought Jesus before the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate. The Jewish leaders lacked the authority to carry out an execution, so they sought Roman approval. Pilate questioned Jesus carefully. He found no evidence of a crime deserving death. Yet the crowd, stirred by the religious leaders, demanded punishment. Seeking a way to avoid condemning an innocent man, Pilate sent Jesus to Herod Antipas, the ruler of Galilee. Herod had long wanted to see Jesus perform a miracle, but Jesus remained silent before him. Frustrated, Herod mocked Jesus, dressed him in an elegant robe, and sent him back to Pilate. Pilate again declared that he found no guilt in Jesus. Hoping to satisfy the crowd, he offered to release him according to a Passover custom. The people could choose between Jesus and a convicted criminal named Barabbas. Pilate expected them to choose Jesus. Instead, the crowd shouted for Barabbas. Again, Pilate asked what should be done with Jesus. The answer thundered through the streets. "Crucify him." Pilate was astonished. What evil had Jesus done? Yet the cries only grew louder. "Crucify him." Fearing unrest, Pilate gave in to the crowd's demands. Symbolically washing his hands, he declared himself innocent of Jesus' blood. Then he handed Jesus over to be crucified. The suffering intensified. Roman soldiers took Jesus into the governor's headquarters. There they stripped him and placed a scarlet robe upon his shoulders. They twisted thorny branches into a crown and pressed it onto his head. The sharp thorns pierced his skin, causing blood to flow down his face. The soldiers mocked him as king. They knelt before him in ridicule. They struck him repeatedly. They spat on him and beat him with a staff. Then came the scourging. Roman flogging was unimaginably brutal. Jesus was tied and whipped with a scourge embedded with pieces of bone and metal. Each strike tore into his flesh. The punishment left deep wounds across his body. Many victims did not survive such torture. Yet Jesus endured. After the flogging, the soldiers forced him to carry his cross through the streets of Jerusalem. The wood was heavy. His body was weakened from exhaustion, blood loss, and abuse. Crowds lined the roads. Some mocked him. Others wept. As Jesus struggled beneath the weight of the cross, he stumbled and fell. Eventually, the soldiers compelled a man named Simon of Cyrene to carry the cross behind him. Women mourned openly as Jesus passed. Yet even in his suffering, he spoke words of compassion, urging them to weep not for him, but for themselves and their children. The procession finally reached a hill outside the city walls called Golgotha, meaning the place of the skull. There, preparations for the crucifixion began. The soldiers stretched Jesus upon the wooden cross. Then came the hammer blows. Iron nails were driven through his hands and feet. Pain surged through his body. The cross was lifted upright and dropped into place. Jesus hung suspended between heaven and earth. Above his head was placed an inscription declaring, "Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews." 2 criminals were crucified alongside him, one on his right and the other on his left. As he hung there, many continued to mock him. Religious leaders sneered, saying he had saved others but could not save himself. Passers-by shook their heads and ridiculed him. Even one of the criminals joined in the insults. But the other recognized something different. He admitted his own guilt and declared Jesus innocent. Turning to Jesus, he asked to be remembered when Jesus came into his kingdom. Despite unimaginable pain, Jesus responded with grace and hope, assuring the man that he would be with him in paradise. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher. The suffering continued. Every breath required immense effort. Each movement against the rough wood intensified the pain. Yet even then, Jesus thought of others. Looking down, he saw his mother standing nearby. Her heart was breaking as she watched her son suffer. Jesus entrusted her care to his beloved disciple John. Then he prayed words that revealed the depth of his mercy. "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." These words echoed across history. He prayed forgiveness for those who mocked him, tortured him, and nailed him to the cross. Around noon, darkness covered the land. For 3 hours, an eerie gloom settled over the region. The moment carried a profound spiritual significance. Jesus was bearing the weight of humanity's sin. The one who had lived without sin was taking upon himself the consequences of sin. The burden was beyond human comprehension. As the hours passed, Jesus cried out in anguish. The suffering was not only physical, but spiritual. The weight of the world's brokenness rested upon him. Near the end, Jesus declared that he was thirsty. A sponge soaked in sour wine was lifted to his lips. Then came his final moments. Gathering his remaining strength, Jesus spoke words of victory. "It is finished." The mission for which he had come was complete. The price had been paid. The sacrifice had been offered. Finally, Jesus committed his spirit into the Father's hands. Then he breathed his last breath. At that moment, the earth trembled. The ground shook violently. Rocks split apart. Inside the temple, the great curtain separating the holy place from the most holy place was torn from top to bottom. The barrier symbolizing separation between God and humanity had been removed. A Roman centurion standing nearby witnessed the events and declared that Jesus truly was the Son of God. Many who had gathered to watch left in fear and sorrow. The crowds that had demanded his crucifixion now faced the reality of what had occurred. As evening approached, a respected man named Joseph of Arimathea courageously requested Jesus' body from Pilate. With the help of Nicodemus, he carefully took Jesus down from the cross. They wrapped his body in clean linen cloths and placed him in a new tomb carved into rock. A massive stone was rolled across the entrance. Guards were posted nearby. To many, it seemed the story had ended. The disciples were devastated. Their hopes appeared shattered. The one they believed to be the Messiah had been crucified. The tomb stood sealed. Silence settled over Jerusalem. Yet unknown to many, this was not the end. The suffering, the trial, the humiliation, and the crucifixion were all part of God's greater plan for redemption. The cross was not a symbol of defeat, but of victory. Through his sacrifice, Jesus demonstrated the greatest love the world had ever known. He willingly endured betrayal, false accusations, torture, rejection, and death so that humanity could receive forgiveness and hope. The darkness of that day would soon give way to the light of resurrection. The tomb would not remain closed forever. Death itself would be conquered. And because of what Jesus endured on that painful journey to the cross, countless lives throughout history have found grace, mercy, forgiveness, and eternal hope. That is the story of the trial, suffering, and crucifixion of Jesus Christ. A story of sacrifice beyond measure, love beyond understanding, and a Savior who gave everything for the salvation of the world.